Hi guys, so this episode we're going to be continuing on with our Star Trek Discovery episodes, and obviously we just got episode 4, so let's talk about it. This episode was there was bits I liked, there was bits I didn't. I didn't feel it was as strong as the previous 3 episodes, but we'll get to that bit after I've done a rough outline of the episode. So we start the episode with Hugh, which is the ship's doctor, and he's doing like a medical log, and you see him going around the crew scanning them, and it becomes clear at one part in the episode that the crew are suffering from anxiety, which obviously you'd expect because, you know, they've jumped into the future, they've left everybody behind. So obviously it would make sense that there's some sort of anxiety going on. And this was actually a part I liked because it, for once, it sort of positioned Hugh in the limelight of an episode, which was nice. Even though it wasn't really for a massive amount of time, he was sort of there in the forefront for a bit, which was nice because we haven't really seen a massive amount of him. And also it sort of showed that the crew are human. You know, they're not just like a military sort of force that are trained and don't feel anything, you know, robots basically. They're not. You can, in this episode, you see the more human side of them, which was a good little addition, I thought. So that part I liked. However, if you've watched my review of the last episode, you'll know that there was something that happened in the last episode that I wasn't too happy with. And that's a big part, really, of this episode. Not so much because I wasn't a fan of it in the last episode, more so much because they elaborate on it and I didn't like that, but we'll get into that. So it becomes clear that because there's a conversation between Saru, Michael, Hugh, and the new character, Adira, who's obviously the one that's carrying the symbiote, or symbiote, shall I say. And there's a conversation and they're talking about what they're going to do, because obviously she can't access the memories. And they make it quite clear in that conversation that she is the first ever human host. It's never happened before. So at least they've addressed this, because like I said in the review for the last episode, they always made it quite clear in previous Trek that only Trills could carry the symbiote. So it's like, well, okay, how has this happened? This makes no sense. So it becomes quite clear that she is the first. This has never happened before. So at least they've addressed it. And they discuss about the fact that they need to get the symbiote's memories of the, I believe he was an admiral that left a message in, and they obviously had picked it up in the last episode. And obviously they need to find Starfleet, the Federation. And obviously they're thinking he would have the memory of where they are. Because as we know, if you've watched my other episodes, they've jumped into the future. There was a thing called the burn. It obliterated the Federation. So they're scattered, what's left of them, and they're trying to find them. So what they decide is they're going to go to Trill. Now they do make it quite clear in the episode that they're not sure how the Trill are going to be. They might be more hostile than they have been in the past, etc, etc. If I'm honest, I could see what was coming a mile off. It was obvious. If you've seen previous Trek, you know that the Trills, they're very funny about the symbiote thing. You know, only people who have gone through the program can have a symbiote. And when people who haven't gone through the program, like for example with Dax, there was in one of the episodes there was a guy that was dropped from the program, and then he decides he's just going to steal the symbiote from her. Obviously that gets frowned upon. So we know that they're very funny about that. So it was obvious that when they turned up at the planet, they weren't going to be happy about the fact that she's human, which of course is the case. When they turn up there, Hugh says to Michael that he wants her to go with her as support because she needs it. And there's a little bit of dialogue there about how Michael herself is struggling. And he says, yes, I know, but basically says you put other people first and you're good at that. So she goes with her. And of course it becomes quite clear when they meet, I think it's 4 or 5 representatives from the Trill, that they're not too happy. They say, oh, you know, I thought you was bringing a host, you know, that's carrying a symbiote. And she's like, well, yeah, her, you know, sort of thing. In a nutshell, it's her. And they're like, but you're human. So straight away, they're not happy. And this is one of the parts I didn't like. The dialogue was very clunky. The acting from the Trill people was, in my opinion, terrible. It did sound like they pretty much was just reading it off the script. There just didn't seem any emotion behind it at all. So this was a part I didn't like. And there's a part discussed where they've got to a point now where there's nobody that can take the symbiotes. Now, we know that only in previous Trek, only selected individuals are even capable of taking symbiotes, let alone pass the training to have one. So we know that they're few and far between. And one of the guys straight away turns around as he's the keeper of them, if you like. We've seen them before in Deep Space Nine. He says, well, look, you know, maybe this is our way forwards. You know, maybe we need to branch out and look at other potential hosts other than Trills. And of course, the rest are like, no. And there's one individual that even makes it quite clear that he wants to take the symbiote out of her, which we all know will kill her. So he don't care about that quite clearly. So anyway, they make it clear that they don't want her there. They want them to leave. And as they're going back to the shuttle, they get jumped by the one that wanted to take the symbiote out of them. And as per usual, Michael does a hero thing and shoots them all with a phaser. And then the Keeper appears and he takes them off to the pools. Now, of course, we've seen the pools before in DS9. And I thought we was going to get a bit of a retread of DS9 where she gets in the pool and the symbiote comes up and communicates with her, because we've seen that in DS9. The symbiote come up and all these memories that had been suppressed all come to the surface within Jadzia. Well, they changed it with this and I wasn't a fan. The minute she gets in the water, her eyes turn white and it's like, well, okay, I haven't seen that before. And then there's a part where she gets pulled under and Michael goes in after her. And they put these sort of stick things in the water, which apparently will transfer her, so they can communicate, basically. And you find out these little tentacle things are trying to attach to Adira, and basically Michael works out that that's the memories trying to reconnect with you. And long story short, she gets the memories back. Yeah, it was all a bit, I don't know, a bit weird, and I didn't like it. I preferred the way they'd done it in DS9. You know, the symbiote comes out, there's a bit of electricity, literally, between them, and then she remembers stuff, you know, and I would have preferred that. It just seemed like it was a bit contrived and done in a way so that it could fill the episode out, because there's not a massive amount to this episode. There's a bit of character development between the crew, but there's not a massive amount. So yeah, that pretty much is the long and short of the story, really. There are other bits that happen, and we'll get into that now. So, so we know, obviously, like I say, that Hugh said to Saru, the crew are struggling, and there's a part where he's trying to figure out what to do, and he's asking the computer questions, and the computer's voice changes, and it goes red. The computer screens, instead of blue, go red. It's quite clear at this point, this is the spheres from season 2, you know, the information they downloaded, communicating with them. It's quite clear that it's mixed itself into the computer. So now we're going to see pretty much a living ship, I think, in this season. which isn't a bad idea. You know, it has been done before in other sci-fi, but and kind of done in Voyager, I believe, if I remember right. So it's different, but also the same, if you know what I mean. It's kind of hard to explain my thoughts on that, but yeah, it'll add something to it. I think it will make Discovery very different to other ships. So anyway, getting on a tangent here, it basically gives him advice on what you should do to sort the crew out. And that's advice that he should have a meal, sit down, have a conversation, and share, sort of memories and stuff like that. So that's what he does. And of course, it doesn't go according to plan. It all goes a bit pear-shaped. What's his name? Stamler. He gets in a bit of a dispute with Detmer over, They kind of had a bit of an argument. She says, oh, you think you're so great because you can control the spur drive, and I'm the one who landed the ship because she's the pilot, and she refers to the ship as a monster. So, and then it just basically turns into bickering and everybody sort of walks off, so it's all a bit of a failure. Of course, we know, Star Trek being Star Trek, at the end they will all come back together, and a few of them do. They apologise to Saru, apologise to each other, and everything's good again. So, one of the things that was a bit of a dispute earlier in the episode was Saru says to Stamler that that they need to look at a way of using the spore drive without him, because as we know, he controls it now. And they're saying because we haven't got dilithium, or there's a shortage of it, we're obviously going to be using this drive more often. And after what happened last time where you got injured, we need to find a way of controlling it without you being the core principle of it. So, and he takes a bit of exception to that, and I think he's too happy about it, because we know it's his lifelong work, and I think he's kind of got used to his role. I don't think he's too happy about it. So, until he sort of interjects and says, well, I've been looking at dark matter, and I think there's a way that if we integrate it into this, and he basically shuts it down. So, that happened earlier in the episode. So, after the dispute at the table, and a few of them come back and apologise to each other, it gets mentioned, and he said, you know what, it is a good idea, maybe we should look at it. So, it is something they're going to look at. So, it's quite clear that the spore drive is going to become more of a thing in this series, quite clearly. I mean, we've seen it used a couple of times in the episode already. And it's interesting because season 2, they kind of toned it down with the spore drive. And I think the reason they did that was because fans weren't happy with it, let's be honest. It kind of contradicted previous Trek. We'd never seen this sort of thing. Of course, in season 2, they tried to pass it away by, even season 1, by saying it was kind of black project. So, you was kind of left to think, well, it was a secret project. That's why we never heard of it. Season 3 kind of has fixed it in a lot of ways, because where they've gone into the future now, it would make sense, because you wouldn't have heard of it, because when it was in the past, it was a black project, but then it went into the future. So at this point, it's quite key, because dilithium's not a thing, as we know, because of the burn. So now this ship has got a way of travelling, and it's possible to do it without the dilithium. So this is going to really come into the forefront in this series. So it's quite clear that when they do find the Federation, I imagine from this point onwards, this is what all the ships are going to end up using, really. And it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways anyway, because we know that this type of travel's instant. It goes from one place to another in a blink of an eye, not like warp drive. So, it makes sense, especially in the future, that this could be a thing. So, and obviously it being a black project, I suppose you meant to think that information has got lost over time, and that's why we never saw it. So it does kind of fix things a little bit. I think there's a bit more explaining to do, but it's kind of going the right direction with that. So, yeah, so there were, like I say, there were bits that I did like. But there were bits I didn't. And the whole thing with the Trill and the symbiote and that. I didn't like that. And in fact, actually, I was a little bit irritated as well on one thing. I thought, judging by the hints, we was going to find out that the symbiote was Dax. And of course it's not. So, but then thinking about it, it wouldn't make sense if it was, because they've jumped into the future. I mean, we know that the Dax symbiote ended up with Jadzia and Ezri. It wouldn't have made sense if it had jumped into the future, because it would be, well, hang on a minute, how would that work then? Because it would undo the previous timeline, wouldn't it? So in some ways I was like, well, I wish it had been Dax, but then I thought, yeah, it wouldn't have made sense if it was. So, yeah, I was initially quite intrigued last episode that they was bringing a symbiote into it, because I thought, oh, that's pretty good actually, because, you know, other than DS9, we haven't really seen that. So it'd be good to elaborate a bit on it. But then in that episode when we found out she was human, I was like, oh, I don't like this. We know this isn't a thing, you know. So, and I don't think this episode really helped any more than that, because they certainly didn't explain how she took on the symbiote. I mean, all we know is that her partner was carrying it, and something hit the ship. He was dying, and she agreed to take the symbiote. We don't really find out how it is she's compatible enough to take it, how her humans even took a symbiote. Don't find out any of that, which is a bit annoying, because I think if you're going to go to Trill, that's really something that you should be explaining. It's an important part. At least if it's explained, you can then accept it and move on in the season. But at this point, it's like, well, oh, okay, so she can take the symbiote for some reason, and that's all we're getting. So, yeah, so that part annoyed me. And the reason it annoyed me is because this is Alec Kurtzman all over, isn't it? This is what he does. Chucks things in, doesn't explain them. And this is part of the thing that's ruined Discovery in the past. It's also what ruined Star Trek Picard. You know, throw things in, don't explain them. You know, part of a good story is to explain things that are happening. If you don't explain it, you're not telling a story properly. So, yeah, so that's what bugs me. And it gives me a bad feeling, because it's like, well, if he's done it in episode 4, is he going to do this in more episodes? And if he does, then the wheels are going to start falling off again. So, yeah, yeah. The previous 3 episodes I thought were quite good. This one, not so much. So, yeah, we'll have to just see where it goes, won't we? So, yeah, I mean, I think I've covered most of it. I mean, there's obviously little details, like there's a part at the end where, because one of the things that was suggested to Saru by the computer was that making people laugh is good for anxiety, basically. And it suggests, you know, maybe put a comedy on. Well, near the end, they end up in the shuttle bay, I think it is, or the cargo bay, one of them. And they're projecting an old comedy, an old black and white, and they're all sitting there laughing. So, you know, it's a bit cheesy, but it's Star Trek, innit? That's what they do. So, yeah. So, you know, so there was a little bit of character development from the crew, not a massive amount, and obviously a lot about this new character, and not a lot of explaining. So, yeah, it was just seemed like a filler episode, really, if I'm honest. So, yeah, not a massive fan, but hopefully we'll get past it into the next episode. Something interesting will be happening again, hopefully. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave it there. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. And hit that little notification bell so that you're made aware of our future videos and live streams. Also, check you're still subscribed, because YouTube's doing its usual thing where it's unsubscribing people, and yeah, I lost quite a few subscribers in one day, and I find that very odd. I don't believe in coincidences. So yeah, so if you have been subscribed, just check you still are, because YouTube's known to do this. People just disappear off of, you know, so. And there's a lot of channels that I watch that are actually complaining about this at the moment. So it's obvious it's not just happening to our channel. So yeah, anyway, like I always say, take care and stay safe, especially at the moment, because we're in dodgy times at the moment. And until next time, Nerdy Geezer out.